Hey everybody, thanks for popping in the Ant Panda channel. Of course, you know me, I'm Ant Panda, and we're going to talk about a game I finally got to finish 2 years in the making, and that's going to be the new Resident Evil 4 Remake. This was such an incredible title. I want to spend a video talking about it, reflecting on it, and kind of doing a retrospective, because I know many folks have played this early on, and not a lot of folks may have jumped back into it, but I assure you that if you haven't finished everything there is to know about this game, you should. And let's talk about that. The differences between the original, release for the GameCube, PC, back in the early stages of the initial GameCube era, to the remake version that was released here in 2023, and just talking about those differences and talking about the impact that the changes from the Resident Evil 2 remake did, maybe all the way to the events up to Resident Evil 4 remake on Leon, and just kind of a nice little retrospective on what makes this game, in my opinion, and probably a hot take, an even better remake that I would say with the Resident Evil 2 remake. But let me explain. So let's start from the beginning. So as you play Resident Evil 4 Remake, this particular game opens up to Leon in Spain looking for the kidnapped daughter of the US President of the United States, Ashley Graham. As he's being driven by two police officers in a vehicle onto the country, he reflects and talks about the main events from the ending of Resident Evil 2 in Raccoon City, where he reflects on the major changes, most likely of PTSD, and all the things that have broken him into the state that Leon S. Kennedy is now, having to leave behind, Marvin Brennan, having to leave behind Kendo and his daughter, and seeing how these many lives of folks are gone but not forgotten. The story continues to reflect upon this as he mentions that he gets referred to as a special mission as well as special training, with eventually some images and shown of imagery of Krauser, who he runs into later on. Playing as Leon, he speaks to himself through the game and the events that kind of transpire, as he's then left to himself as one of the police officers for the Lonely Village goes missing, and he goes in to investigate. Finding out later on, of course, that there's much more to this village than has been seen, but his instincts definitely carry him through as he finds more evidence and clues to the whereabouts of Ashley Graham. In the original Resident Evil 4, this is also pretty similar. The introduction of Leon with the Ganados is a bit different, as in the original, you really are fighting something that is clearly not a zombie, but in this case, you're fighting something, a bit of an undead trait, where he literally basically kills this individual, takes out this individual, and still walks around with a broken neck, as well as being undead and some of those traits. This carries on and shows a bit more of the horror aspect and a bit more of the effectiveness and savagery that the Ganados provide, as many things kind of happen from that. The gameplay for this game is pretty fantastic, as it takes upon the same beats from the original and expands upon it.
Sure don't.
The knives now are part of your inventory. They do take durability, and you have to repair it periodically, as well as collecting different knives that can be used a bit more until it's fully used or broken, which I think is a fantastic mechanic. Plus, it has the ability where you can parry just about anything. This includes axes, weapons, chainsaws, and of course anything else. You can also, even in some cases, parry a bullet if the right circumstances are there. This just builds upon it with a lot of the different shortcuts the expanded weaponry and ammo that is built upon. You could play the game a few different times and go a few different routes on weaponry and have a totally different experience. This is an excellent game that has the same feel from the original GameCube version. The ambience, the music, and everything else is reflected. There's some tracks that you can actually recall from the original being reflected in some of these arrangements in the music. You're playing the controls of this, it just feels like regular Resident Evil 4, but brought to a more realistic and more current day configuration when it comes to mastering your weapons and actual aiming mechanics. But there is a few caveats or a few weaknesses, which we'll get to in a bit later. The story is what I think is the strongest point. They brought that up from a level B to a level A type of horror image or story that you can get behind, and it builds upon the different relationships, not just you as the player with Leon, but also with Ashley, Louise, and even Ada to some extent. The lore is completely expanded, with more information being written and discussed and found about the Ganados, the chief, and all the different enemy types in the game that actually exist, that really kind of reflect a bit more of a empathetic and kind of thought-provoking story-driven elements that makes you really think about what this place could have been like before, the Las Plagas took over. Ramon and also Sadler, as well as Batoris Mendez, make an appearance, and they are all very similar and the same, as well as, spoiler alert, towards the end credits, Mr. Wesker also makes an appearance. But the story is what really makes this game just sell. The relationship you have with Ashley, it comes at a very dark place when you initially meet with her. As you play the game and discover that she has an old pink razor that is broken and just ripped into pieces, you really start to think of the torment and the problems and issues that she's been experiencing since her capture. When Leon goes to actually rescue her, it doesn't become a simple choice of, okay, well, this is all you have, and now we're friends. She builds upon the friendship with and trust with Leon and you ultimately as the player, as she's very uncertain and unsure if you really are the person that was sent from her father of the U.S. president. And that trust is built on over time with a little humor sprinkled in. A lot of the original kind of horror B, terrible voice line jokes of old also are not shown in this particular game, of different assets and ballistics that was referenced from Louise making a pass. Louise actually builds a relationship with Ashley in a sense of endearment and trust, as Louise is now brought up in the best way possible. He is given a bit more justice for his work in the game, as you get to play alongside him for a lot longer than just, the defense portion of the house defending Ashley. And it's quite apparent that they put a lot of additional story and a lot of built-in trust there. And it just makes the game flow so much better. Him also, unfortunately, passing from Krauser instead of Sadler adds an additional element where Leon is then forced to have to go against his old friend turned enemy, Krauser, and gives it a bit more of a point of why you're looking to kill him versus just to get past him, just to get to Sadler later. And it really does well, because it was a little weird in the original where Sadler actually went and killed Louise and then nothing happened. Now Sadler kind of shows up more towards the end. Boom. And is very Swift brutal looking with his glowing eyes. The Sadler fight and the conflict with Leon and Sadler is quite excellent. Same thing with Ramon and Leon, and there's a bit more of a intensity there instead of a comedic dialogue that there was in the original. That's not to say there isn't any comedy with Leon. He's very sarcastic, and he has a lot of sarcasm in there, as well as trying to build rapport with Ashley whenever Ashley does get controlled and actually stabs him with a knife in constant situations. And it's actually quite endearing and wonderful when it comes to them building on their friendship. To the point where literally Ashley, as innocent as she is, does kind of joke about the fact that she wants to be part of the same team that Leon does afterwards being trained, as she ends up helping him throughout the entire story and the game. But of course, Leon chuckling it up,
so that's how they separate her,
and
instead of
Ashley kind of laughing it off to say, "You're just no fun." But there's no overtime jokes or anything of that nature, other than pure respect. Some comedic kind of references, but also just good old-fashioned, survival when it comes to trusting each other. And so the only downside or the only weaknesses with this particular game, I would say, is the aiming mechanic, and the way that this game actually plays out with the gunplay also has a little bit of a weakness at times, where some moments, and it's not all the time, it's about maybe 95% of the 95% that this occurs, where sometimes the hit scan of actually shooting enemies just doesn't quite register in the same way. There have been times that I've made shots at, the regenerators, which are quite terrifying, by the way, and also certain placements that just aren't registered in the same. And it's almost like it wants to take, as far as the gunplay, just a switch between an arcade way of gameplay versus a realistic one. And sometimes just the game itself can't decide. The other weakness I would say for the game is, in certain parts of the game, there are a bit much in the sense of insta-kills. Now, that's not to say that there shouldn't have those and it shouldn't exist. It actually does a really good job when it comes to fighting Dr. Salvador, and you really don't have much. Of course, you're going to instantly die when it comes with a chainsaw. But the Ramon Salazar fight, when it comes to coming close to basically the head of Ramon, I've probably died the most during that particular boss fight. It was probably the most irritating bunch out of both. That really didn't need to have an insta-kill, and honestly, that fight could have been better, even though it does kind of reflect the same aggressive nature and painstaking problem that the original had, which was with that same boss fight of how irritating it is. And I'm not saying that just because Ramon is of a smaller stature of a man, as well as an excruciatingly annoying character. It just has always been a painful boss fight, and this is of no exception when playing this particular game. The expansion of the shooting gallery, the ability to change cases and actually dangle all the different kind of charms, is actually a welcome addition. I actually ended up really kind of glued into the shooting gallery and wanting to get more of the gacha games for the charms, and it was a really fun mechanic that they included. The mercenary is back, or the merchant is back, and more talkative than ever. And honestly, I think it's a very welcome addition, the way that they portrayed him and the way that they made him come out and sell you each and every good that you need. The challenges have been expanded more than just blue medallions, and it's been a welcome change that makes you go and explore and going around the different map to complete these challenges. You'll never have enough spindles. It's great that they allow you to do that, as well as fighting all the different, different type of enemies in order to collect those, as well as all the different treasures that you obtain. So this in and of itself is just fun, and you'll keep revisiting it over and over again, as well as with the mercenary content. Why do I think that this remake does well, or even better than Resident Evil 2? Well, I think it just kind of depends, but the part that really sets it separate and makes it above is just taking the source material, expanding it, and making it just best all the way around. You'll recall with Resident Evil 2 Remake that the A and B scenarios were basically kind of written in such a way or made in such a way to seem different, but kind of didn't really make sense in the grand scheme of it, which was a major weakness, I thought. Mr. X is not nearly as terrifying in, kind of the B scenarios. There's definitely some different changes that they made with Resident Evil 2 Remake with those A's and B's that I wasn't really the biggest fan of. So in a sense, if you reflect upon kind of the major weaknesses of 4 and 2, I would say Resident Evil 4 Remake, in a sense, delivered or executed better with the development teams and everything that was done. The only reason I would say it's not, kind of better with flying colors is because of the fact that they made separate ways in a DLC. If they didn't make it a paid DLC, I think it would be a clear winner to say that it would. But since it is a paid DLC, you're not getting the full picture, which you've been given in the past for additional kind of, replayability of Resident Evil 4. So I guess my question to Capcom is, was it worth it? Was it worth it to make the DLC purchasable? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if it was a good gamble, but I would almost say that I don't know if it was worth the cost, because I think it probably could have got a 10++, masterpiece ratings if separate ways maybe were included as part of just additional content that was included with it. So overall, the fear, the horror that Resident Evil 4 brings to the table is excellent, and I love all of it, and I'm going to replay all of it even more. The way that Ashley's, kidnapping had occurred, and some of the slight details to really bring the horrific treatment she was giving, the effects that it has on her, the hesitation of the trust with her and Leon, and also less annoyability as it was in the original, makes this game just quite excellent in that sense. Bringing justice also to Louise was also another high point. Louise deserved a lot more in the spotlight, and we got it in this particular game. And it was really clear that they put a lot of love and attention to this story, which makes this game, in my opinion, probably quite more excellent as a remake. And why it furthers a great idea that when you remake games, this is kind of the standard that Capcom continues to deliver and should continue to deliver for the rest of Resident Evil games that keep coming out. And other companies should really take into account that this is how you remake a game. Thanks for showing up for the video. If you want to catch kind of the time that I was able to kill flaming Dr. Salvador in the nick of time, you could check out my Twitch as well as some of the shorts that I have here, because that was quite an excellent achievement of mine. And also all the problems and the wonderfulness that this game brought on my Twitch channel, as well as the shorts and other things for YouTube that I'll have in the Amped Panda Extra channel that you can also reflect and see. Again, thanks for your time. Hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this retrospective and reflection of Resident Evil 4 Remake. And I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.